So for me, it's very similar to the slide that Ksenia showed there. You know, when I'm thinking about this interaction between buildings and the grid, I need to make my building capable of interacting, and that requires some level of digitalization. In the way I look at things there, going from the top left, it's about capturing data, bringing that data into one place so that everyone can see it. And then it's once you've got all that data and you've put it together that you can start to look for patterns there, and you can use your machine learning or other analytics technologies, both to save energy and also to create flexibility for the grid. But you can find out whatever you like, but you've got to implement that. And so there's a decision and action step there in the bottom left. And there's a whole range of digital technologies emerging that are enabling that. And Ksenia has talked to some of those. Clearly, we need smart meters, but that is not enough by itself. We need to bring together that smart meter data with information about what's going on in the buildings. Apply the analytics, and then we need to have measurement and verification and actuation and automation of what's going on in the building. Typically, that's all happening on a digital platform. Some might call this an Internet of Things platform, or a data platform, or a sharing platform. And one of the terms that I like to use is an energy management information system. This is a term that Lawrence Berkeley National Lab has used. And so just how does that work out then? So this slide is showing that role of digitalization there, starting with the collection of the data from all the diverse sources that you might want, bringing it into that data warehouse so that you can make use of it. And it's then you start to get to apply that to useful value-adding cases. And I've listed 5 cases there. And just what the role is of digitalization to make that possible. At its very simplest, digitalization enables you to distribute information to stakeholders and provide transparency. In Australia, the Neighbours platform has been incredibly successful as creating transparency around the energy performance of buildings. And that has been used for buildings to compete to get to better energy performance. But then going down to another layer of detail, you can have sub-metering on equipment and then apply energy analytics. And you can actually see the cause and effect of taking action and seeing the reduction in energy consumption. And ideally, that leads to settlement in terms of getting financial payments for the performance improvements that you make. Going to that third layer, starting to drill down even more into the building, you can apply fault detection and diagnostics there to work out what equipment is performing and provide recommendations on how to improve the performance. And then the last 2 there, building controls optimization and flexible demand, are all about then actually automating processes for improving the performance. And typically it's those last 2 that have been a struggle to achieve in any automated way because people get quite protective about the control systems in their buildings. The difference between the 2 is that flexible demand is then interacting with the electricity market and in fact responding to automated way to pricing signals. So, you know, we've been doing a lot of trials and demonstrations of this in Australia. And, you know, I guess what I've discovered is that there's 2 kind of perspectives here. One perspective is the building owner's perspective. What is the building owner getting out of this digitalization journey? Well, for them, they may be really interested in comfort and productivity for the occupants in the building, providing a better service for them. It may be around security, that is making sure that people don't get into parts of the buildings that they shouldn't be in. Could be about maintenance. a whole raft of value-adding services that are really all about the building and managing the day-to-days of the building. Overlaid over the top of that, certainly in Australia, is a great desire to go on a path towards net zero, and that's the sustainability side of things, and a number of different things you can do to improve the energy performance of buildings. If I look at the electricity industry, though, they've got quite a different perspective on it. They still want digitalisation, but they've compartmentalised what they think that they need into the sort of market services that relate to operating a reliable and efficient electricity system. So it's about wholesale market spot prices, it's about demand management when electricity networks are constrained, and it's about frequency ancillary services, all these different things that mean something to the electricity industry but are completely foreign to building owners. And then there are all these different forms of response that Ksenia mentioned. I've used the California shift, shape, shed, shimmy. Ksenia used slightly different terminology. But these sorts of things here are quite a foreign concept to building owners. So how do you bring the two together? And what are the issues that both sides of the equation there, the electricity industry and the property industry, what are the issues that they face? So we've done a lot of sort of barriers analysis and we've done focus groups around this. And one of the big highlights there is that particularly for existing buildings, it's considered to be a high cost thing to make the building connected to the cloud or to any sort of digital platform. As a retrofit, it is deemed expensive, and typically it's considered to be a complex investment, and the understanding of what the requirements are to bring the building into the 21st century and digitalize is considered quite a difficult thing to specify. And so there is this great uncertainty around what the return on investment might be. And then there's a range of technical barriers. Ksenia mentioned the interoperability issues. And so when we considered it, we decided there's probably a two-step process here to bring buildings onto the grid. The first bit is just establishing that infrastructure, IT infrastructure connectivity. And then the second step is to apply the analytics and the smarts, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, whatever, to provide value-added services. And some of those services will be for the electricity industry, and some of them will be for the property industry. And typically what we found is that step two is in some ways the easy bit. The payback times in terms of return on investment can typically be less than 2 years. And so it's a good value proposition, that step two. But all those barriers that I mentioned before, they tend to occur in that step one around getting your existing building connected up and ready to do digital performance. And one of the people that we talked to said, well, if you're trying to do both steps all in one hit, then it's almost like trying to put a thread through the eye of 2 needles all at the same time. And so I guess one of the things that I'm arguing for in Australia is to perhaps create some kind of halfway house position, which we will call digital ready. That is an enabled building, and to specify that in a way that reduces the complexity and enables people to do it at reduced cost. I've got a couple of examples here. One particular example here is around a hospital in Australia. And this particular hospital, it is going through doing a building management system upgrade, and that's going to cost around about $600,000 to take out the old legacy kit that's past its use-by date. And the company doing that has said, well, just for an extra $40,000 on top of that $600,000 BMS upgrade, we will expose that data to other third parties. So that's rather magnanimous of them, the fact that they'll be willing to accept a mere $40,000 so that they could be actually subject to competition from other providers of services. Once that left-hand side, that's the digital connectivity, has been established, the actual analytics component, and I'm just taking data here from a study by Lawrence Berkeley there, the actual cost effectiveness then is actually really quite good. The fault detection and diagnostic, and I've got sensitivity analysis of the energy savings between 6% and 12%. And what we reckon is that looking at what's happened in other hospitals, that should have a 78% return on investment. That's a hell of a good investment, but it is all predicated on the fact that there was this BMS upgrade happening at the time, and that the $600,000 has been paid for already. In my second case, this is the case in Energy Queensland. In this particular case, the IT connectivity component of it is actually using the existing Ripple Control communications capability, which is unfortunately only a one-way connectivity, but then connecting that up to what is called demand response enabled devices installed in split system air conditioners in residential homes. That is standard AS 4755 demand response enabled devices, DREDs. And Energy Queensland have just done this fantastic behavioural economics piece there, where they've said to the air conditioning suppliers, listen, we'll give you $50 to put this DRED inside the air conditioner, and we'll pay the householder a one-off, either $200 or $400, and then we have installed capacity available to use whenever we want to. And as it so happens, the economics of that as a one-off payment and amortizing that over 10 years, that's coming in at flexible demand capacity at 20% of the cost of electric batteries alternative. As it so happens, the Energy Queensland, they've got 150 megawatts of this demand response capability at a really low price, and they've hardly ever used it, but whenever they have used it, they've done it without any sort of customer discomfort feedback. And so the key there to the low cost is all about sharing existing IT connectivity and linking up with the existing industry supply chain and piggybacking off of the things that they would be doing anyway. So just one sort of pointing this out in a slightly different way. If I look at the electricity industry in terms of the timing of when they would provide an incentive versus the property industry when they're willing to do an investment, you get these on the incentive side. The wholesale market gives you moments of wholesale price spikes, and the property industry have moments where they do a maintenance contract extension. It doesn't synchronize the timing of these. The big one really is when the property industry is doing a BMS head-end upgrade. That's when you can establish your connectivity at very low cost, but the electricity industry may not be actually ready to invest at that point in time. But the big one from the electricity industry perspective is when the network's about to get augmented. But unfortunately, the property industry may not be at the right timing cycle. So ultimately, there's this big question about who's taking the responsibility or ensuring to get that timing synchronized there for establishing that digital ready capability. So my take homes then is that the electricity and the property industry, they both want to digitalize buildings, but for different reasons. And so the alignment is the key thing. There are a bunch of barriers. They particularly relate to getting the building connected and ready to operate. And so therefore, if we can provide standards and guidelines to support that journey to digital ready and use low-cost existing infrastructure, then we will significantly improve the potential for grid interactivity. But you do have to work with the supply chains and not do it in isolation. And once you've done that, there are an abounding amount of cost-effective solutions, but I could certainly give you plenty of war stories in terms of how hard that is to actually get going, not due to the cost economics, but the friction in the system. So just leaving you with a couple of sort of policy ends of the spectrums. Would I go with a regulated solution, or would I go with a commercial solution? The commercial, if I was going for a voluntary commercial, perhaps that's to drive competition, but I think this is a dog-eat-dog competitive industry that is already quite competitive, and what they're really needing is economies of scale or economies of repetition there, and that will both address interoperability issues and provide solution clarity. So personally, I'm a little bit leaning towards the regulated solution to bring down the cost, but I acknowledge that industry is probably not going to be real happy with that. So possibly ratings and certification schemes are the halfway house approach. I've already mentioned that the electricity industry and the property industry have got different reasons why they would get involved, and so that would require you to target things differently. But again, there's a bit of a halfway house there, which is the actual analytics and BMS contractors companies who may be the ones that are better off incentivized as they've got a direct technology involvement in the building. And then my last one there is, should I go for the full stack in terms of my incentives? The good thing about that is it provides very good clarity around the value that you're offering. But actually, I see the bulk of the barriers sitting around that necessity for getting digital ready in the first place. And so to create some clarity around that and incentivize that may be the easiest way to get people through only one eye of a needle rather than to try to get through two at the one time.